Ni hao, guten Morgen, guten Tag to everyone in the online world. In continuation to the understanding of the sustainability aspect from the portal point of view, particularly in the World Wide Web, we would be touch basing on the UIs. So there's another window which is working with me right now. Anyhow, so the point of contention of this discussion is to discuss the graphical user interface in terms of the UI, which can be utilized for the upscaling stuff. And particularly, this discussion is limited to develop different algorithms which can be utilized for the um, judgment point of view in terms of the determination step. So when we talk about the upscaling, and particularly in terms of the SDG goals, which is the Sustainable Development Goals, Homo sapiens sapiens are supposed to be in three categories. We have kids, we have adults, and seniors. And at any point of time, it can be a pendulum of thoughts also. Now, to analyze this time space kernel clustering, we are going to dive deep into this application, and particularly this reminds me of something which I have been thinking of discussing from the understanding of the UI, which is a user interface. Although I would rather say because of the decision making capacities of the CEOs, CFOs, and all those lucrative terms, companies like, I would say, BlackBerry, Nokia, although they are not dominating the market per se, but perhaps they did develop a lot of stuff which I still feel is good from the skill point view of upskilling. For example, is the tile format. If you go back to those Nokia devices of that time, and particularly, I would rather say with the stylus and all, uh, the model number, which of course I had almost all generations of Nokia at one point of time. But the point of contention here is to learn from the past, put into the present, and develop the future. I think that's the easy mantra to get things done in a fast, speedy format for the online world. So the this particular application which I'm talking about, I'll if you have any questions, you can put your questions in the comment box. I'll just talk about the main highlights in terms of the clustering part, in terms of what kind of data kernels can be extracted and utilized to develop different game models, because skilling is all to do with the gaming models. This is nothing to do with betting. It is just upskilling or upscaling folks, because there is a lot of individuals or inhabitants or candidates right now who are technology deficient. So there's deficiency of technology because the whole understanding was not understood by many folks, and particularly they didn't upscale themselves during the tenure of, rather I would say, 2020 to 2023. So let's deep dive into this. So I'm fetching the data set for this particular application, which is corresponding to understanding the kernel clustering part, which is important from point of view of developing different modules for the user to use, and automatically based on the user's feedback. Now, this is different from what is available right now to the masses. And the differentiator is the personalization part, which is particularly at each question, whatever the question is being asked, or question per se right now is being called as the word prompt. It has to be very generalized. And when it is generalized and you're asking the same question, maybe 15 different types of same question, you will receive different kind of answer, and depending on those 15 outcomes, the input is developed, which is the outcome for the next block of that particular game. Okay, so this particular uh, application which I retrieved, or the framework, it talks about the travel part, which is basically traveling in the offline world, recording the same through different devices, apparatus, machines, and utilizing that data for the signaling purpose to make those small, I would rather say, the iterations in this particular case. So, particularly, this is looking into the large scale. Okay, so it's looking into the large scale travel data analytics, and particularly fuses the mobile network signaling. So, the network signaling of the handheld device, mobile per se here is the handheld device, and how the internet is being used for the fetching of that data. So, um, obviously, if you are compressing the data set, then it's going to take less internet just for the logging purpose. And it applies a dual stay stop correspondences, which together is a temporal kernel clustering in this particular case, which is delivering an OD matrix and list of the traffic planning. So, right now, what happens is when you're using any of these maps, um, perhaps you get to see the color coding, and then you decide which route to take to reach to the same destination. And I had actually worked on one of these applications way back, perhaps, oh my gosh, uh, perhaps I worked on something a decade back, and it was very similar in this case, but it had the cyber angle to it. So this is also taking care into the demand management purposes. Now, what is happening here is how the data acquisition is happening. We need to understand this. There is a designated time window. Say, for example, forget about travel. Take a cluster data set of a place where there are folks who are coming to offices. uh, there's something called as remote, there's something called you have to come to office, and all that data set, I'm not getting into it. But when you're coming to office, you have a route. Now, in that designated time frame or the window, you are collecting user signaling records triggered by high frequency events. Events can be scenarios also, and corresponds user browsing logs. So perhaps uh, the candidates utilize handheld devices in different ways. I personally don't like to utilize devices when I am traveling from one destination to the other, because according to different PubMed articles over the years, it has been stated that um, if people really understand the basic physics, so when you're traveling from one destination to the other, you are, I would rather say, the frontal lobe and the other lobes of the brain has to spark a little bit more acetylcholine A just for that signaling purposes. And that is one reason you will see people who are at the driver's seat, or people who really drive from one location to the other, their way of executing a practical problem would be very different from somebody who is at the sitting at the rear seat. So the point I'm trying to say here is the brain, or I would say the human neuronic way of understanding the signals, depends upon the kind of work culture you have from 24 cross 7, in terms of from the time the candidate is waking up, what is the schedule, then what is the next schedule, then what is the next schedule, and over time that schedule becomes a part of the life. So in this particular case is, if there's a data acquisition is also happening, in terms of there are many folks who are logged on to the devices for whatever reasons, and that data is also collected and sampled, which is based on predefined rules. I'll give you one example. There are ride hailing services, and I was part of this Mobius stuff, which was headquartered in Singapore, and somehow that model has been copied by the current players in the market, whereby uh, They are shown, like as a candidate who is utilizing that service, they are shown some advertisements. And folks who are really, like, who forget about the offline life, they are actually logged on. They will open that browser, then they will be redirected to another thing. From there, will be redirected to something. So perhaps one has to look into the data set. When I feel, in terms of the candidates, is the data set of architects. I mean, you will see these architects of any level, whether it's a junior or whatever the, their hierarchy is. They work on big screens. What happens is, it's not that, you have a big screen, you are going to be more intellectual or intelligent per se. It's just an observation, and is already well documented in the documents. um, when the horizon is big, in terms of the way, if somebody is able to apply the physics and the chemistry and the biochemical part of the whole equation, you'll be able to appreciate and develop a very different sample set. So look into that aspect also. Then there is two stage stay stop mapping. So mapping perhaps can be done in different ways. In this particular stage, it is two stage, and it is stay stop. So this SS. So SS here doesn't stand for stainless steel. It stands for stay stop mapping. So SS, stay stop mapping. And uh, the word stay here is kind of a fixed, first extracted from raw trajectories. A finer grained stop confirmation is then performed. That is basically a determination step, yielding an initial stationary point set that already carries the temporal activity signatures. So perhaps, if you go back to my video, you'll be able to appreciate how first the data acquisition is happening, and then we have the SS mapping. So SS is stay stop mapping. Then the third part is the spatio-temporal kernel clustering refinement. That is particularly, it's a density, it's a kernel density based clustering algorithm, which is applied in both space and time to move the noisy data set, or I would rather say the greasy data set, perhaps. So I have coined this new one, the greasy one. And that tightens the whole spatial boundaries and produce a high accuracy sequence of stationary points. And then we have the validation and algorithmic self optimization. So I have been focusing on this aspect of self optimization a lot. So all the sub modules I'm working on, except few, are self optimized. It's kind of a loop which goes on and on and on, which is learning at any given point of time. So in this particularly groundbreaking path, what is happening is you are manually labeling the data, which is used to validate the resultant stationary points. Now, this can be a job sector for the manual intervention. So we need to know and understand where the manual intervention is going to happen from the human counterpart as far as the admin is concerned. So the labeling has to be done, and it's not only the timestamp, but we need to have a stay, stop, not gap arrangement, but a stay and a stop arrangement. Next is activity pattern analysis for special population. So again, special population can be based on zillion characters or parameters or the elemental analysis. Perhaps I would say in this particular case would be analyzing the heat map, perhaps the tourism business, then other special cohorts, extracting their distinct spatio-temporal activity patterns. Next, we have the traffic cell level OD matrix generation, which is particularly using the traffic cell as the units. And the stationary point sequence are transformed into origin destination trip chains. So it's like you're getting them onto the on chain aspect of understanding the OD matrix generation. The final output is an OD matrix and a trip list that faithfully capture the space-time travel activity chain, providing low-cost, high-precision big data. So big data is not a particular map. Big data is basically the data which is based on the individualistic characteristic of the individuals, perhaps not based on the college, not based on their family or clan. It is perhaps out of the bias kind of a data set. So it cannot be biased when we are talking about cleaning the internet, cleaning the mindset in the online world for the individuals to foster a good life. Then, particularly, as I said, SS here stands for the stay stop correspondence relation, and it has a relationship with the spatial temporal kernel clustering. It improves the rationality and accuracy of stationary point identification and OD matrix construction while reducing. You don't have to get into that, uh, investment of the GPS, which is basically the positioning of the latitude and the longitude based on a dedicated survey data. Again, the survey data generally are rigged, so don't look into that data set. And making large scale engineering deployment feasible. So this is the basic thing. Let me see if I can talk about what are they trying to judge in this particular case. So I'm just looking into the independent patent claims. Independent patent claim doesn't mean that that is the ambit of a particular framework. It is just collation of the data set in a compressed format. Okay, so data itself can be of three types here. One is the user portrait label, that is the attribute data, that can again be based on the objects which are stationary. So that perhaps can be deleted and that data can be fortified, and just look into the aspect of what is important in that data set. And let me tell you, even if you give a same background to maybe five candidates, you will see those five candidates taking the pictures in a different format altogether. And that's the psychology you need to understand when you are trying to develop an algorithm or a attribute data set. Then perhaps you have to extract the data, and it's easy. Like most of these Androids and iOS platforms, they provide you with the uh, the tagging in terms of. Okay, great. Okay. They provide you the tagging in terms of the recent, maybe 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and based on the dates on which the snapshot is captured, you have the data set. So one is the heat map, which I'm that's one of my favorite stuff. I have been working on the heat maps for more than 20 years now, so that is something I have been enjoying doing it. Next is particularly applying a high frequency analysis that considers the residence time interval frequency as how the cluster is being formed. For the high frequency points that meet predefined threshold, where you have a predefined parameters, where this parameter is checked upon, and then the candidate is going to perform. Maybe if this parameter is checked, then the candidate performs, maybe give them multiple scenarios to work on. I think the other part is not required to be discussed. I believe that even just getting a very small data set of what we discussed right now would be good enough to categorize the algorithms into different small modules and use those modules to train based on real data. Please don't get into the synthetic data. Synthetic data has already created so much of chaos for the online world, and that chaos is being replicated in the offline world because of this entropy is always increasing. And nothing much can be done in that regard, but what we can do is to be good coders of the internet, in terms of be a ninja, samurai, whatever works with folks who understand internet to be positive. So internet has to be positive. AI for good, and all the hashtags, sanitation for AI, sanitized internet, whatever works right now. If you have any questions, you can always send me a DMs. Thank you for pouring so much love. I'm getting a lot of inquiries globally, almost is touching base on so many countries right now. And what is important here is to identify the right. Uh, so I'm part of many of the core enterprises in different capacities, being working in different sectors, and I have my own personal stuff also in terms of what I work with. So it's a wonderful time to build so many things and be part of the, I won't say a gig economy, but an internet economy which is changing the landscape of the offline world big time. I mean, the way internet is changing at any given point of time. I mean, it's a fantabulous time to just upscale yourself and just pool your resources. Don't try to develop anything new. Everything has already been developed. What is the need of the hour is to collaborate and make that impact for the society at a large, and see the magic happen for yourself. Thank you for watching out the video. Thank you for watching out the video. Have a great weekend ahead.